Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to speak as of in morning business and that my statement appear with other tributes to Senator Kennedy in the record.
Without objection.
Mr. President, once again, we mourn another Kennedy, the last brother, a friend, a colleague, a senator, larger than life, even in death. Certainly the most effective legislator of our time and arguably the most effective member of this body in the whole of American history. Across this nation and across the political divide, we have seen the impact of his life and work in the tearful eyes of millions of Americans. Each faced a challenge to continue his long and lasting legacy of hard-fought, hard-won battles for hard-working families everywhere. His is a legacy of hope for the unemployed, the dispossessed, the downtrodden, the undereducated, the uninsured, a legacy of hope for Hispanic Americans and Asian Americans, all Americans who have come to this country often with little more than the clothes on their back and a glorious dream for a better life. Ted Kennedy will be remembered by my generation as more than the last brother, more than the end of an era. He will be remembered as America's preeminent leader on fair, responsible, humane immigration policy that always put people first. For all of us, he was the standard bearer of headier days, of Camelot, of intellectual vitality, political energy, and a deep and abiding commitment to public service and to this beloved Senate. He taught us through actions and deeds in times of great personal pain the power of the human spirit to endure and prevail. He symbolized the best of an era of progressive, compassionate leadership in this country and a deep belief that we must always ask what we can do for the country, a torch unexpectedly passed to him which he carried with dignity and humility through great tragedy as well as great triumph. He understood that our personal struggles, however profound, make us stronger in the broken places, as Hemingway said. For every Hispanic American and every American across this nation whose family came here to find a better life, whatever their ethnicity or political views, Ted Kennedy was a leader. His deep and abiding concern for the struggles of hardworking people was not political. It was a matter of simply part of the Kennedy DNA. You know, I remember the images of his brother Bobby Kennedy in 1967. 6,000 people surrounding him in the flatbed truck that held a severely weakened Cesar Chavez. Bobby Kennedy shared a piece of samita with Chavez, and the crowd cheered. They grabbed at Bobby to shake his hand and thank him. He stood in front of the crowd and he said, quote, "The world must know from this time forward that the migrant farm worker, Mexican American, is coming into his own rights. You are winning a special kind of citizenship. No one is doing it for you. You are doing it yourselves, and therefore no one can ever take it away." Well, fast forward to Washington, D.C. in 2006. Walking in his brother's footsteps, Ted Kennedy stood in front of hundreds of thousands of marchers on the same ground his brothers had stood upon decades earlier. He stood with immigrants and faith leaders and organizers. He called for comprehensive immigration reform. The crowd of hundreds of thousands roared, and he roared back, "Sí se puede, sí se puede. Yes, we can." Now he's gone, having fought his last battle with courage and dignity as he fought all others. But the memories remain. I remember first coming to the Senate, sitting down with him, his presence as commanding as I thought it would be. I looked to him to learn all I could from him about the Senate, and frankly, there was no more patient or willing teacher. When I first sought to come to the Senate, the one member of the Senate who gave me the most time and gave me the most encouragement and the greatest opportunity to understand how to be successful in the Senate was a person I could do the least for. It was Ted Kennedy. And I'll never forget his kindness. We worked together to protect the Senate restaurant employees when their jobs were privatized. And I learned what made him such an effective legislator, because even as he was dealing with the most incredible issues the country was facing and leading on many of them, he had time to remember the importance of that little person, people in the Senate restaurant who might have been unemployed. We all know that no one can belt out an Irish ballad quite like Teddy could. One of my favorite memories was of him and I in New Jersey in a campaign where we sang Irish ballads together. And I learned then what made him the unique person he is. I'll never forget the sound of that voice and the warmth of that heart. Each of us has had our own memories of the man. Each of us has had our own deep emotions when we heard of his death. The editorial cartoonist Lalo Alcaraz said when his wife heard that Ted Kennedy had lost his battle with cancer, she pulled out one of her old buttons that her mother had worn during the presidential campaign in 1960. That day, Lalo Alcaraz drew a cartoon of a much younger Ted Kennedy. Its caption, two simple words on the campaign button: Viva Kennedy. So as I sat in the Basilica in Boston with our colleagues last week, I thought of all Ted Kennedy did to better the lives of so many Americans. And I thought of those two words, over and over again. Viva Kennedy. He was a man who truly believed in the idea and ideal that is America. And though we may have come from different backgrounds, different places, different cultures, though we may speak different languages, we are one nation, indivisible, forged from shared values and common principles, each of us united in our differences, working for the betterment of all of us. And no one worked harder for the betterment of all of us than Ted Kennedy. So it's my sincere belief that in his passing, he has once again worked his magic and given us an opportunity to come together, united in a deep and profound feeling of loss and emptiness, as we are even at this day. It would be like him to be looking down upon these tributes today, nodding his head and smiling. But he'd be saying, don't wait for my memorials to be laid. He would say, don't wait for my words to be chiseled in marble at Arlington. Don't wait for some bronze statue in Washington or a bridge named after me in Boston. Stand up. Do what's right for the American people now. Do what is right for hardworking families in your states, for hardworking families in my state, in New Bedford, in Brockton, in Fall River, or Worcester. I can see him standing over there where he always stood, committed, informed, imposing, pounding on his desk, shouting at the top of his lungs. You could hear it from when you were outside of the chamber when he was in one of those moments. Those families don't have time to wait for a decent job and wages. They don't have time to wait for a better job. They don't have time to wait for decent, affordable, quality care that is a right and not a privilege. That booming voice would echo through this chamber, and I think it will echo through this chamber for eternity. Mr. President, when it comes down to it, we are his legacy. We in the United States Senate are his memorial. We are the burning candles, and he would tell us to have them burn brightly. stand against the wind, stand against the storm, stand against the odds, for it is up to us now to light the world as he did. In this past week, I think we have all found new meaning in those familiar words of Aeschylus, when he said, "And even in our sleep, pain that cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart. And in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom to us by the awful grace of God." Today in our despair, let wisdom come. And let us honor the memory of Senator Edward Moore Kennedy by not only remembering the man, but by continuing the good work he has done. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor